From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. Today was the 15th legislative day, bringing us to the halfway point of this 2023 regular session. And leading the news tonight is the introduction of a new proposal to cut sales tax on groceries. State Senator Andrew Jones partnered with Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth to introduce Senate Bill 257, which would gradually cut the state's 4% sales tax on most grocery items to 2%. Specifically, it would reduce that state sales tax on groceries by 0.5% each year beginning this fall until the rate is 2%. The bill also has fiscal guardrails. The tax reduction would be paused if overall tax revenue growth in the Education Trust Fund fell below 2%. That's to ensure there is no revenue loss on funds going towards education. The bill is co-sponsored by every member of the Senate, Democrats and Republicans.
So this is going to produce a reduction in everybody's bills, and I think that's important. Everybody's going to benefit from this. And you look at, we're one of 3 states that still taxes groceries where we do. It's time to end that. We've been working on this issue for a while. I think first, it's going to cut the grocery tax in half, so it's $304 million. That's a big tax cut. It does it over 4 years, which I think is certainly smart to make sure we continue to have growth in the ETF. And I think people realize that the time is now to do this. I know when I served in the House, we wanted to do it. We just couldn't do it from a fiscal standpoint. Now we're fortunate we can. And we want to give everybody an Alabama tax relief.
And I co-sponsored the bill. The Lieutenant Governor did talk to me and ask me about it. Of course, I have another version of the bill. I'm supporting it. I'm going to vote for it. And I just want the people of the state of Alabama to get some type of relief. Of course, I think my version of the bill is better because it's more immediate. And also, we are replacing those funds and not losing funds from the ETF. But again, any type of relief that the folks from the state of Alabama can get, I'm going to support and be behind.
Jones estimates his plan would amount to annual savings of $200 to $250 for an average Alabama family. Items that qualify would be those listed as food based on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Plan, which is the more generous definition. I'll speak with Senator Jones in more detail later in the show. Meanwhile, the Senate took up and passed Senate Bill 154, dealing with the state's doctor shortage. State Senator April Weaver said the state's healthcare workforce is under strain from retirements, physician burnout, and growing healthcare needs. The Physician Workforce Act streamlines the licensure process at the Board of Medical Examiners and is meant to help recruit more doctors and better utilize Alabama's existing physician workforce.
And if we want more doctors to practice in Alabama, we need to make our state more welcoming to doctors, and this bill does just that.
The Senate had a special visitor today in Auburn head basketball coach Bruce Pearl. Pearl was in the State House marking the 75th anniversary of the State of Israel. The Senate passed a special resolution honoring that milestone and celebrating its connection to the state of Alabama. Pearl last year took his team to Israel to experience the Holy Land. Invited to speak on the Senate floor, the coach spoke of the special bond between the two countries.
War Eagle. And by the way, yes, we did play the Israeli national team, and we did almost beat them. The problem was the officials were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we just couldn't get a call. Here's why I took my team to Israel. I brought my team there because I wanted them to see where Jesus walked. I wanted them to see the Garden of Gethsemane where he was betrayed. As a basketball coach, my job is always to bring people together. That's what I do. I look at Israel as the greatest place we can bring people together. Grateful that the capital, Jerusalem, is now a place where anybody and everybody can go and pray and visit and get closer to our Father God. It's truly an honor for me to be here. I love this country with all of my heart. I love the state of Alabama.
Down in the House of Representatives, there was lots of discussion about a proposal to expand Alabama's manslaughter charge to apply to those who sell or distribute a controlled substance that results in a fatal overdose. House Bill 82 from State Representative Chris Pringle would expand the Class B felony charge of manslaughter, which carries with it a 2 to 20-year sentence, to include those who recklessly cause the death of another person by selling or distributing a controlled substance. The Alabama Department of Public Health names 30 drugs as being considered controlled substances, with some of the more common examples being amphetamines, fentanyl, cocaine, and oxycodone.
And what this bill says is, if you are selling a controlled substance, oxycodone or any narcotic, and you are not a doctor or a pharmacist, and you kill somebody, you can be charged with manslaughter.
We've just passed a bill that deals with the fact that fentanyl kills people. We all also know that there are other controlled substances that do likewise. This is not going to be an easy bill for a district attorney to prove. You've got to prove the individual died. You've got to prove that that individual died by virtue of ingesting this particular material, and then you've got to prove who gave it to him. It's not going to be easy to prove. Murder, manslaughter cases should not be easy to prove. I have no problem with that. Nevertheless, I support the bill because I think that it is a reasonable consequence and a reasonable extension of what we're trying to do around here, which is prevent people from dying.
That bill passed by a vote of 88 to 11. The House also marked a significant day in Alabama history. It was on April 27, 2011, that an outbreak of tornadoes struck this state, killing 253 people. Before adjournment, State Representative Wandolyn Gavan asked for a moment of silence in honor of those lives lost.
2011, many of us who were here, we were actually debating a occupational tax bill. At that time, John Merrill was still in the House, and Representative Hill, who's now in the banking division, we actually used it as a stall factor to adjourn or recess for the day, the weather, only to realize that it was actual. I see some folks in here remembering now, shaking their heads, only to get to a point by the time we got to our hotels, one of the most devastating tornadoes had touched down in many locations in the state of Alabama, ultimately killing over 250 Alabamians, hitting Tuscaloosa, areas such as Pratt City, Phil Campbell, and others, and with complete devastation. So if you would, in just commemoration of the 2011 April 27th storm, join me in a moment of silence to remember those victims and lives lost. Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair, thanks, lady.
We'll be right back with tonight's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Joining me next is State Senator Andrew Jones from Gadsden. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Good to be with you, Todd.
Big day for you. We've been anticipating the bill you've been working on grocery sales tax dropping. It dropped today. You've got legislation with 35 co-sponsors, or I guess 34 co-sponsors, a total of 35 sponsors, on a bill aimed to cut sales tax on groceries. It's been one of the most topical issues of the session. But in truth, I haven't read your bill, only seen the highlights. Walk me through what your bill does.
Sure, Todd. Well, it's a big day for the state of Alabama. This is something that has been talked about and dreamed about for decades now. What this bill would do is reduce the state portion on grocery taxes from 4% down to 2%. through a gradual phase out. And that phase out would not occur if there was not 2% annual growth in the education budget each year for the drawdown. So we're making sure that the education budget, our children and their education is protected through this process. So that's the key makeup of the bill. It's a gradual drawdown that's cognizant of the economic times we're living in.
Okay, yeah, so previous grocery tax proposals have sought some kind of revenue replacement, because that's the whole game, is that these sales taxes, even on groceries, go to the education trust fund. That's really been the reason sales tax hasn't passed for the last 20 years. And so previous proposals have said, okay, if it's going to cost $400 million, $500 million, however much from the ETF, then we're going to make that up in other ways. Sometimes it was the elimination of the federal income tax deduction, things like that, other ways to make it up. This doesn't do that. This is basically saying the ETF can absorb it as long as there's growth. Is that a fair way to characterize it?
That's right. And I myself, when I first began working on this in 2020, had a revenue replacement mechanism, but times have changed. That's partly due to inflation and the cost of groceries and other products. The sales tax rates have remained the same, but revenues are at record highs because people are paying more on the cost of goods, and therefore there are more revenues. So the timing really is right, in my opinion, to do this without revenue replacement, do it in a thoughtful way, because you've got people paying more because of these increased taxes, so they need the relief for their families.
Mm-hmm. And to put that 2% in context, this last budget year, we saw a 20% growth in the ETF. Now, of course, a lot of that was these federal funds. It was clearly an anomaly, but there's been several years now of pretty consistent patterns of growth in the ETF. Yeah, we are looking at, there's talk of a recession. We haven't really seen the signs necessarily here in the state, but nationally we're looking at a recession. Are you concerned at all if there is a recession, then we don't get growth, then folks don't get that relief?
Well, we've got to be cognizant of that as a legislature. We need a budget for lean times that possibly may come. So I think this bill is cognizant of that, in that the drawdown would only occur if there's that positive growth. Otherwise, there would be a pause, and that's going to do it in a sustainable way where it protects that budget for our needs in an uncertain economic future.
Let's talk about WIC versus SNAP. This is also a big detail of the bill that maybe a small detail in text, so it's a huge detail in scope. WIC, women, infants, and children, it's a definition of a certain pot of federal money and a certain group of products in the grocery store that's a lot more narrow. SNAP, basically better known as food stamps, is a lot more generous. A lot more groceries would apply to the SNAP model and that list of groceries that you can buy. Which model does your bill use?
So we use the SNAP definition of food because to us it's the only real relief for families. SNAP covers every edible product in a grocery store except hot prepared foods like at your deli, you're getting a plate at your deli or something like that. It doesn't include things like beer and tobacco, gum, toothpicks, toothpaste that you might find in a grocery store. The problem with WIC is that it's much more restrictive. It's only about 1 out of 4 items in a shopping cart. And there's no rhyme or reason to it other than it's meant for women, infants, and children. So, for example, under WIC, canned fish is allowed, but fresh fish is not. Fresh meat is not allowed, fresh vegetables are, but canned vegetables are not. So it's really kind of this weird Rubik's Cube of items, and those are really designed and they're brought in limited supply for this program and these subset, this group of people. So, really it's not designed for anything like this. I also have people say, well, why not just have a new coding system or something of that nature? Well, that's really tedious because you've got new products every day coming onto the market, and who's going to define what is or isn't? So we're just saying, hey, if it's edible, it's covered, under the SNAP definition. So that's going to be the real relief for families.
And also, grocery stores are already set up. They're, like you said, the coding system. They know what a SNAP product is. I'm sure that's a lot easier to go and do that. brand new system, that's asking a lot of your grocery stores.
That's correct. And based on our research and talking with the grocers and others, there are about 4 times as many SNAP locations as there are WIC locations in the state. So really, to us, the choice was obvious. We have to go with SNAP.
Well, let me ask you this. Coming into the session, there was talk of all kinds of different sort of tax relief. And maybe it's not necessarily mutually exclusive, but it has kind of come out like, okay, should we do a grocery tax cut or should we do a tax rebate? Everything I'm hearing is more going toward the grocery tax cut. And again, maybe they're not mutually exclusive, but what are you hearing from your colleagues in the Senate about the whole tax rebate idea, the one-time checks to people? Are people more hesitant now that this grocery tax has taken shape?
Well, I'm hearing from constituents that they want let's have a rebate every year on our grocery tax rather than just a one-time rebate. So that's what I'm hearing from my folks back home. They want real relief at the kitchen table because folks are paying for an essential item that their families have to have, and this to them is a more genuine form of relief.
Mm-hmm. And there's also talk of, well, if you save $200 a year, $300 a year, whatever at the grocery store, that just is part of your family budget. Perhaps it gets spent elsewhere on other items that are taxed at that full, percentage, which again, most of that goes to the ETF. Is there some consideration there that maybe this won't be the budget hit that folks have always thought it would be?
Definitely, and one of the things we've been discussing is potentially having some sort of task force, not in this bill, but a separate resolution to create a task force to study this issue on how to go from the remaining 2% from 2 to 0 on the grocery tax. And part of that discussion would be looking at how revenues truly are affected in the ETF. As you well mentioned, Todd, folks are going to likely spend that money on something else that will be taxed, and those taxes will go back into the ETF. So there's a thought that the hit to the ETF or the impact to the ETF will not be as dire as predicted.
Well, we're out of time, but this is certainly an issue we're going to watch going forward. 35 sponsors, 34, that's pretty significant. And obviously want to mention the Lieutenant Governor, we heard him speak earlier, has his weight behind it, which is also significant. Senator Andrew Jones, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate you having me.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Joining me next is State Representative Napoleon Bracey from Saraland. Mr. Bracey, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we had our general fund budget on the floor this week. You're on that committee.
Yes, sir.
You actually carried the state employee pay raise. This is a cost of living raise that goes to all state employees. Talk about the importance of that in terms of state government.
I think it's very important. It's something that we should try to do annually. Sometimes we can't, but we know that the cost of living in our country is continuing to rise. The cost of goods and services are continuing to rise. You notice that you can't go anywhere just about right now without getting a receipt asking you for a tip.
Even if it's not a sit down.
If it's not a sit down service type of deal, and and inflation, just everything is just continuing to go up. I know we can't keep up with inflation, but we can do our part to make sure that we do something annually for our state employees. And I was just really fortunate to have the opportunity to sponsor the legislation to give our state employees a 2% raise becoming effective October 1.
Yeah. I'm often vexed by that tip thing. It's like, go get a cup of coffee and tip 20%. Oh, okay. I want to support this industry, but that is a new thing.
Right.
It's interesting because these were unanimous bills. The general fund passed unanimously. There was not really much argument between Republicans and Democrats. I was talking to Chairman Reynolds, and he said y'all had basically a joint meeting where Republicans and Democrats got to come with their own needs and changes maybe to the budget. seems to me that's kind of rare. You see a lot of rancor across the country, especially in Washington, but y'all seem to work together on this thing.
We really did. We had budget hearings this year. We've had opportunities to have the budget presentations, speak to different department heads. It was just a really transparent process. Then right before the budget came out, we had a joint meeting of both caucuses where people can ask questions. Kurt had an opportunity to brief people on where we are, and people can kind of see what's happening. And I think that really helped the process. If you notice, general fund budget passed in about 15 minutes.
Right.
I mean, it was one of the fastest times that I've seen a general fund budget pass in my 4 terms here.
Of course, it helps when there's a surplus, right? It helps when you're in actually good budget numbers. And, you know, folks that have been here as long as you and those who are watching that have paid attention for years or decades know that this is kind of a new thing, because you go back 10, 20 years, and the general fund was always the one that was problematic because there's never enough money. But that kind of started changing with the online sales tax, right? The SSUT.
Definitely. The SSUT was a big deal. You think about a lot of people were shopping from home, especially during COVID. And, you know, that gave us an opportunity to receive a lot of more income into the general fund budget. And it's definitely gave us the surplus that we need to be able to do things like these pay raises for our employees, because they're well deserving. And it just gave us an avenue to make that happen for them.
Do you feel confident that that revenue is going to be more stable? I mean, people are talking about recession. We haven't really seen that here in Alabama, but that's the concern, is that, okay, a recession happens and maybe those spending habits change. But in y'all's dealings with Kirk Fulford, is there some confidence that it's at least going to continue in the near term?
I think so. The SSUT has continued to grow. And, we thought that it would kind of stabilize or maybe take a dip, but it's been really strong. And it's definitely something that we've benefited from. If you think back a few years ago, we didn't have that, and it's definitely been a plus for us. It was almost like tax-free shopping online. And but now we're able to collect that. Not only that, but some of those funds are going back to the counties and the cities to help with road projects. They can use that money to float bonds to do real serious capital improvement projects in their communities, and I think that's just been a real benefit to everybody.
Yeah, and I remember at the beginning when they started doing the SSUT, online sales tax, people were upset, saying, I don't want to pay this sales tax. I think that's changed. I think everybody sort of expects, of course, you're going to have to pay a state and local sales tax.
Right. I think it's only the fair way to do it. Nobody want to pay more taxes, but we can't create an unfair advantage for some people, especially people out of state, over our mom and pop and our brick and mortar establishments that are here, that are starting to have to close down because people are shopping more online. But you have to have it competitive for them, to make sure that if people are paying taxes there, they need to pay them in this area, or either they need to not in both areas.
Switching gears, I just spoke with Senator Andrew Jones. He's carrying this grocery sales tax cut. It's not the same as we've seen in the past, but he's got the support of the entire Senate up there, all co-sponsors. Pretty rare. What are you hearing in the House? Do you think that this is going to be the year that something on the grocery tax actually passes?
I think so. I think there's been some major concerns from different areas, and hopefully those will get worked out. The difference in the definition of SNAP and WIC has been a major concern, because it takes away some of the different things that you can purchase tax-free. So I guess depending on the definition, that's the final definition of the bill, will depend on the level of support that it gets.
Yeah, I agree. I've said, at this point we've seen 3 or 4. We may see a half a dozen different grocery tax bills. So I'm curious, as it goes through the process, which one actually emerges, or if everybody starts disagreeing and and nothing happens, because that's kind of what happened in years past.
Right. Sometimes people will disagree and nothing happens, and sometimes you may have a disagreement and force people into a conference committee, and you got 6 people that has to come out with something, and now it's an up or down situation. So that could be the route that this is going.
Yeah. One of those big issues to watch. Well, Mr. Bracey, I know you've got to get south to Mobile, and really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you so much, and you've always opened the door for me and given me a platform to speak to the constituents of Alabama, and I just really appreciate the opportunity. And if you ever need me again, please let me know.
We will.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Thank you. All right.
We'll be right back.
Mobile native Leroy Satchel Paige was one of the finest pitchers in baseball. Early in his career, he played for the Birmingham Black Barons and would go on to pitch in more than 2,500 games, throw more than 100 no-hitters, and play professional ball into his 50s, making a one-game appearance for the MLB Kansas City Athletics in 1965. Paige was inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 1971, the first Negro League player so honored.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7:30 for our Weekend Review show here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.